Glory be to God the Word, Spirit speaking truth and life. Teach our hearts to love your way, Word of life eternal. Glory be to God the Word, Spirit speaking truth and life. Teach our hearts to love your way, Word of life eternal. Alleluia. Alleluia. Alleluia.
A reading from the Gospel according to Matthew. Jesus said to his disciples, "For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard. When he went out again about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing, still available in the marketplace, and he said to them, 'You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right.' So they went. He went out again about noon and about 3 o'clock, and he did the same. And about 5 o'clock he went and found others still standing, and he said to them, 'Why are you standing here waiting for work all day?' They said to him, 'Because no one has hired us.' He said to them, 'You also go into the vineyard.' When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, 'Call the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first.' When those who came at 5 o'clock, each of them received the usual daily wage. Now, when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage. And when they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, 'These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat.' But he replied to one of them, 'Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to the last the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last.'" Here ends the reading.
Alleluia.
Are you upset with me because I am generous? This past Friday was at sundown, the beginning of Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. And as some of you may know, I live in an interfaith family, so my wife is Jewish, as are our 2 sons. And we have a custom of gathering with good friends that, like so many of you, we can't see. And so we did what one does in this time, and we gathered on Zoom. four households wishing one another a sweet new year with the traditional apples and honey. Of those four households, most of them have had a surplus of what I like to call capital E events in the last year or two. And one of the teenage boys in the mix was sort of reflecting on his moment right now. He's a junior in high school. And one of our friends said, well, how's it going? And he said, well, I can't complain. And it was really a sign of his acceptance and not resignation, which was saying something given the five teenagers in the gathering. So the adult chimed in, you know what? I may need to take up your attitude. That's really helpful. And then the high schooler finishes this line by just commenting that, well, it wouldn't do any good to complain. You can't change it. And it was such a sign of real acceptance of where he had power and where he did not. I think, like this friend of mine, most of us have the capacity to suffer through a fair amount. And most of us may save our breath for when we think it will be most effective. Complaining, grumbling, kvetching, these make one theme in both of tonight's readings. We hear that the Israelites grumble against Moses. What have you done? Have you brought us out in the wilderness to die? And we hear a similar theme taken up by the farm workers. We bore all the heat and the sun and the burden of the day, and you're not going to take care of us more? So they're grumbling. That's one level. And we can probably identify with the desire to grumble every now and again. But underneath the grumbling are some real legitimate grievances that these peoples have experienced. So Israel, we'll recall, is fleeing slavery and oppression in a foreign land in Egypt. They're wandering through the desert. They have promises that have yet to really materialize. And so they're like, hey, Moses, help us out of here. And Moses is like, no, not me, God, right? They are fleeing one disaster and living in limbo. That context is really shared by the farm workers, and it's a little harder to hear that in this text. I have the great privilege right now of being employed, and I don't get up every day and renegotiate the terms of my employment with Grace Cathedral. I can't for the life of me imagine what it would be like to be a day laborer and have to do that negotiation every day, and then wait to see whether somebody wanted to sign up for that. So we are dealing with a complicated multi-class system where there are landowners and there are probably people who manage the land and have some sort of fixed compensation package, however minimal. And then there are folks who have to do the hoping and negotiating every day. And there's a fair amount of precarity that is baked into that system. I wonder, where do you see yourself in these stories? I'll confess that until Monday afternoon, I saw myself as one of the grumbling folks in the vineyard. Wait a minute, I've been bearing the heat all day. And I think there may be some intent by the gospel writers for us to see ourselves in that light. But the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. For those of you who know this text well, you might have observed that I made some edits to the authorized translation because there's a repeating word that is idle and standing around. It works somewhat in English and less so in Greek. And basically what the author is trying to communicate is that these folks keep showing up to the place where they're going to be invited to work and they're not hired. It's not so much that they're lazy bums, it's more that they are waiting to be chosen, and they haven't been chosen yet. And when I realized that it was that scenario, that softened my heart a bit towards each of those grades of workers, and shed some real light for me on the character of the landowner. The landowner is actually doing something for a group of people that mitigates a structural inequity. Here's a whole group of people who suffer this particular fate, and the landowner is being equally generous to all of them, under the rubric of the last shall be first. It's a hard act for us to follow. So this week, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled 2-1 to affirm the Trump administration was within its authority in a particular way that really connects with this story. And it has to do with what's called temporary protected status. There are any number of immigrants from a collection of countries who have fled persecution or disaster, so a good bit like the Israelites, and come here and are able to negotiate their ability to work legally. So a good bit like the folks in our gospel today. The Trump administration determined, and the court upheld its decision, that they could terminate temporary protective status. Some of those people have been in the United States for nearly 4 decades. There are 400,000 of them, of whom 130,000 are essential workers and 10,000 are medical professionals. And they fled, many of them, the earthquake in Haiti in 2010, El Salvador, beginning in the Civil War, Nicaragua, Sudan, and then there are also the possibility potentially of folks from Nepal and Honduras being met with a similar fate. I can feel the weariness of these neighbors, these sojourners, like the Israelites, and I feel their pain as laborers, people who want to work and live and are forced to do so within systems of precarity. The readings today present us with a vision of God's economy that is so counter to so much of what we think of when we think of an economy. In God's economy, people who make themselves available to work are paid, and people who are fleeing violence and persecution are given ample food each day and an expected day of rest. That's God's response to this economy. Today, I wonder, what if we are not the Israelites in the desert? What if we are not the workers in the vineyard who are angling for that back-breaking, sun-scorching labor? But what if we are the landowners who are charged with welcoming anyone who wants to work and raising the bottom? It is always lawful for us to give. So what is it like for us to join the landowner, erring on the side of generosity and using our gifts to offset the systems of precarity so that everyone can taste some of the sweetness of this life? Amen.